this point, I'll ask our panel to come up. I'll introduce them. And we'll take, hopefully we have a half hour, 45 minutes for you good folks to be able to ask questions and get some information. Okay, let me introduce the panel working the stage left. I did it the wrong way. Tom Johnson's on the far left or your far right. Tom is the vice president at Alpha Geoscience in Clifton Park, New York. He is a hydrogeologist, and he has worked in the field for more than 30 years, including a brief amount of time with the United States Geological Survey. And as a consultant, he's performed hydrogeologic and environmental evaluations. Tom was actually requested to participate in the SGDI process by DEC and did so. And that's the document, if you don't know, that will guide development of natural gas in New York. Sitting next to Tom is John Molko. John is the president of Leonard Resources in the Rochester, New York area. And he's been drilling and developing natural gas in New York for more than 25 years and performing oil and gas operations in the Appalachian region for more than 30 years. He has, his experience encompasses all aspects of operations, including drilling, completions, pipeline development, natural gas marketing, and market development. He holds a Bachelor of Science degree in petroleum and natural gas engineering from Penn State and has, as I said, more than 30 years of experience in the industry. The star of the movie is with us tonight. Thank you for making the trip. And I just met Shelley this evening, so what I do know is what was said in the movie, that she's has a farm, the family, former teacher involved in Truthland. Is there anything that you'd like to add at this point?
No, that's pretty much it.
All right. And then lastly, we have Scott Klein sitting on the other side of the table. Scott also he is a BS in geologic science from Penn State and also holds a master's degree in science and a PhD in petroleum engineering from the University of Oklahoma. He also has an MBA. Do you just go to school or? I'm just teasing Scott. He's worked in the oil and gas industry since 1976, and he's worked as a geologist, petroleum engineer, and a senior manager for several gas companies. And he was one of the people who was involved in the early implementation of horizontal drilling in fractured reservoirs. So you have in front of you, as I said before, a panel that's probably got, more than 100 years of experience in this field. And we're a relatively small group this evening, so I hope you'll take the opportunity to ask questions that you have regarding natural gas development generally, and more specifically the development of natural gas resources in New York, and take advantage of these good people's knowledge and get your questions answered.
Scott, do you know approximately the amount of force used when they frack a well, push on it, and then how far can they force away the property?
I can't get the thing out of here, but as with most things, it varies, but typically with a Marcellus well, it will take about 10,000 psi of pressure to actually begin the propagation of the fractures. Once you overcome the initial opening of the rock, the pressure drops immediately, on, we then add the proppant. The proppant is what's necessary to keep those fractures open, because once we stop the pumping pressure, which only lasts a matter of hours, the rock wants to immediately close. The pressure drops back right to formation pressure. The amount of pressure that we're actually adding to the reservoirs is insignificant, not even measurable really. We have to put that sand in there to keep the fractures open. Otherwise, the weight of the rock above and the stress fields horizontally will collapse those fractures and become totally impermeable. As far as how far the fractures propagate, again, it depends. Depends on the formation, whether it's Marcellus or Utica or Barnett. We know from microseismic work in Pennsylvania and West Virginia that those fractures can sometimes propagate about, depends on the depth. At the mile deep depths, we're able to propagate maybe 1,000 feet vertically. But again, we only prop a few hundred feet of those because we put the proppant toward the end of the fracture stimulation. So at the end, there's only a few hundred feet vertically that's propped open. Additionally, as we go shallower, I think you heard in the movie, one of the people were talking about that. As we go shallower, we are not able to propagate vertical fractures. And you get shallow enough, they actually go only horizontally, and that's not desirable from a production standpoint, but from a standpoint of communication with the groundwater. It's one reason that we just can't propagate fractures vertically when we get shallow. The reason is that fractures are propagated in the direction perpendicular to the least stress. And so as we go shallower, the overburden of the rock becomes the least stress field. And so fractures, as we become shallower, begin to diminish vertically and go horizontally. Completely answered your question.
Anybody else?
Not sure.
I'll just ask, we'll try to answer.
It's not a promise you, it's not a shy group.
Okay, one of the things that bothers me about both movies is they seem to be kind of sometimes anecdotal, sometimes selective. And, you know, one of the things I understand about the environmental groups is for a while, a lot did think that natural gas was very viable, and still do. I mean, I'm not against natural gas at all. But I think it's kind of deceptive to just say that if you have X amount of natural gas, X amount of coal, X amount of oil, and you're using them to generate X amount of electricity or BTUs or whatever it is, that you have that natural gas approximately half as dirty or whatever, how you want to put it. You have to me, you have to take into account the whole shebang, which for one thing, it seems like an enormous amount of diesel is involved. You know, hauling water, particularly water is really heavy, hauling fresh water in to some extent. I know that some of the produced water is reused, but that means that kind of contaminated water is being trucked around, and that's a fear. But running, you know, the pumps, running the lights that are on, and the compressors and everything like that, that's using a huge amount of diesel that has to be taken into the process when you're calculating how clean natural gas from horizontal drilling and on fracking. Okay, and that's something that I feel is kind of not being honestly portrayed. And that's part of it. And the other thing that I think is not being kind of correctly portrayed is the difference between conventional vertical drilling, even if some fracking is used. The conventional drilling is vertical is nothing like, to me, nothing like going down a good mile or so, and going a good mile or so off horizontally. The difference in amounts of fluid and everything that you have to put in there, the fact that is exponentially greater, I would imagine. So it's much more intensive. And I just, you know, the idea that we've been effective for 60 years, but the
there a specific, sorry, is there a specific question? Or-
I got the question.
Yeah, well, I think what she's getting at is the impacts of, the life cycle impacts of these various energy sources that are available to us.
Yeah, I can address the last part of the question, and then maybe John want to do the life cycle stuff. But
We can talk about it.
it is a real popular misconception that horizontal drilling and hydrofracking has a larger impact than vertical drilling. It's absolutely not true at all. The real massive hydraulic fracturing was done back in the 1970s and 80s in vertical wells. We were using 1 million pounds of sand and 1 million gallons of water to fracture stimulate vertical wells with only 100 feet of perforations open in a vertical well, trying to jam that in a 100-foot vertical section. With a horizontal well, we are drilling a mile horizontally. We're maybe using 5 times as much water and sand, but we are spreading that over a much larger surface area. So the real stress on the wellbore is much less. Not to mention the fact that because we can drill horizontally, we eliminate all those surface locations that would have been drilled in a vertical situation. 32 vertical wells would be necessary. That means 32 well pads, each 4 to 5 acres in size, would be necessary to the equivalent to one single horizontal well pad. And so we're putting much less surface disturbance to get the gas out. And we are putting much less stress on the wellbore because we are spreading that out in stages of a few hundred feet perforations, maybe 10 stages. Whereas in the past we were doing that in a vertical well. And so the impact is just a phenomenal technology that is really decreasing surface location needs and is made, it could make us self-sufficient in energy. I mean, let's face it, this is a very energy-hungry world. We have several billion people now in the world just coming out of 17th century existence. They want to drive cars. They want to have houses. They want to have electricity. It's going to take a lot of energy to do that. And most of that is going to come from oil in other countries. That would put tremendous stress on our country to have to import all that oil. Now, because of this technology, we have the technology to switch to natural gas. It has tremendous benefits to national security, greenhouse emissions, and I think it's a great technology.
I'll make a comment on the life cycle because it's been an ongoing debate, and you can sort of analyze just about everything with huge life cycle impacts. I mean, when we consider the economic and the environmental impact of windmills, we don't consider the amount of energy used by the boat to bring the parts over here from China. So it's all really an analysis. But the comment I want to make is, I think everybody in every industry, regardless of what it is, realizes that we have impact, okay? And the energy business and the development of natural gas from shales and unconventional sources is one that is looking at. Now there are numerous companies converting their equipment to burn natural gas. So they're literally taking the gas they discovered, using it as the energy source to start to drill for it, using it to run pumps to pump water instead of running trucks all over the roads. So, I mean, everything evolves to the point where you make it better. And I think, Scott made a very valid point. What we were doing in the mid-'70s was essentially the same thing, trying to recover resources from a much smaller area. And now we've found the combination of what works, and we've unlocked a very, very valuable resource, and one that, from my perspective, we can all be proud of. And each and every day, it just gets better at getting it out. And that's literally what's happening.
I've done a few of these talks with John and Scott, and I was afraid I made a strategic error. Thought I might not get the microphone since John was on the other side of here. I just want to go back for a second with your question about the difference between vertical and horizontal drilling, and point out that the one scene you saw in the movie about the casings and the cementing, that process, you need to realize, is the same for both a vertical well and a horizontal well. In the upper few thousand feet, those casings and cementings are going to be identical, whether the well is vertical or horizontal. What that means is you've got the exact same protections in place for the groundwater system, whether you're drilling a vertical well or a horizontal well, and it really doesn't matter how much of the fluid that you're using, or that you're using a lot more fluid in a high horizontal fracturing scenario as opposed to vertical. So as long as those protections in place, it really doesn't matter whether the well is being drilled vertically or horizontally, because initially they're both vertical. So if that makes sense.
Tom, while you're on the subject, can you describe for folks the differences between the New York regulations to cementing and casing regulations in New York and how they compare to Pennsylvania and other states?
Sure. A lot of problems that started off in Pennsylvania and the Dimick situation in particular was because of casing and cementing practices that frankly were not as stringent as New York has had for many years. If Pennsylvania had the same regulations as New York, the Dimick situation would not have happened. Nonetheless, I'd add that thousands of wells were drilled in Pennsylvania that did not have problems. So in New York, we have a system where multiple casings and cementings are put into place, as you saw in the movie, and with the SGEIS, the new SGEIS, once it's implemented, those will become even more stringent with additional regulation and testing that's required as those casings and cementings are put into place, and inspections that are required by the DEC when the drilling is performed.
I have a question for you, for the DEC, correct? I have a concern because there's lots of wells near me in Syracuse that were drilled by Chesapeake. I have many concerns, but since you're talking about casing, this is a picture of a well casing that was near me, about 6 miles from my house. And it was drilled in 1984, a vertical well that was supposedly shut in on the DEC website was not. It was actually supplying gas to the nearby farmer. It was only after my friend who took this picture, and I documented it, and Bill called the DEC on it, that they made Chesapeake pull a plugging permit, and now it's pulled, and now it's plugged. My question is, we have 4,700 undocumented, documented, orphaned, and abandoned wells. There is no money to plug them. This is 15 pages and 65 cases from the DEP 2009, December of 2009, Bureau of Oil and Gas Management, stray natural gas migration associated with oil and gas wells, mostly old wells repressurized in the vicinity of newly drilled wells. So where do how can I be comfortable that the DEC, if they don't, and there's there's at least tens of thousands of undocumented wells. There's been 185,000 estimated wells drilled in Pennsylvania. These are just a few where the gas was repressurized. So how can we go drilling more holes in the earth when it's documented that the gas migrates and old wells become repressurized, when there is no tool, no funding in place to plug those old wells properly? And if this is 24 years old, this well was drilled in 1984. Look at the casing. This is steel and concrete. Look at it.
Well, part of the answer to that is that the SGEIS does have provisions in it that when a permit is issued, one of the things the operator will be required to do is identify what we call legacy wells within the radius of their drilling. And if those are found, then they will be required to go back and check those wells to make sure that they don't leak when they do additional drilling. From an operational standpoint, Scott or John, you have more of that?
Well, I'll comment on your photograph. I mean, the photograph you have is above ground.
Right.
Okay, so what escaping above ground, and most likely there's no gas escaping from that well. It's probably, literally just filled with water and dead, I imagine. I mean, that would be my guess of the status of that well. The other thing that as Tom alluded to in the SGEIS, New York State has taken a very strict approach to the casing and cementing. And New York, since 1980 in particular, has had direct standards so that we always set casing seats and cement at any point along which we find gas. So what ends up happening, you're not allowed to encounter gas without having a sealed piece of casing above it. So the likelihood, unlike Pennsylvania and some of those older areas where you actually had some wells that were drilled without casing, in New York, you're required to have casing and cemented casing above to protect water below where the gas is. So you have the gas below, the water up above, the casing and the cement are above the gas. So anytime it's migrating, it's coming into the casing. When you have a picture like you have there, the reason that well integrity is deteriorated at that point is predominantly because of the brine concentration in produced fluids. In a lot of cases, that's a fairly simple repair. Okay,
But
just
how do we
replace
see it below ground?
You don't, it doesn't deteriorate below the ground.
Have to have
See, the difference, you essentially have to have air to create deterioration. Okay? So when you get below ground and you exclude air, deterioration stops. I've taken well casings out of wells that are 80 years old and still find the writing on the backside. So, I know you can sit there and it's hard to believe, but that's the experience. And the protections taking to basically create an environment that minimizes or eliminates deterioration is very apparent in the SGIS. That's what they've done. They've created, steel with enough of an annular space to create a cement seal in multiple layers to prevent any deterioration.
Just follow up a little bit on that. That's one of the main purposes of the cement. That's why in New York and most states now, we cement the annulus all the way to the surface. Once you have the entire section between the casing and the rock fully cemented all the way to the surface, you're not going to have any deterioration. That's the purpose of having the cement. There have been in the past some wells that were drilled where they didn't cement all the way to the surface, and that's where you run the risk of having some corrosion from the natural brines in the subsurface when they're directly in contact with the casing, but that's the purpose of the cement. Additionally, you have to remember that once the well is depleted, whether it's been plugged or not, we do plug them now, very strict regulations, but in the past, many wells were not plugged, and they still don't pose a danger for the simple reason that once the well has produced, it's depleted, it's dead. It's like, think of a bottle of Pepsi. You shake it up, it's full of dissolved gas. You open the cap, the gas and the fluids come up, but after some time, the energy in the system is depleted, so that once we have depleted the reservoir, there is no energy for any gas or fluids to move.
That's directly contrary to what the DEP put out in this report. 65 cases of old wells becoming repressurized within 6,000 feet of new drilling.
Well,
So
I have to look at your report, because I think you're probably not interpreting that quite correctly.
You said DEP, is that a Pennsylvania?
Department of Environmental Protection,
From
Bureau of
Pennsylvania.
Oil and Gas Management, and its house is blowing up,
The
its wells.
question is,
I'll
what
get
state,
you.
what state are you talking about?
Pennsylvania.
Okay, thank you.
Pennsylvania.
I'd be glad to look
I
at
will
the
give it
report
to you.
and give you an interpretation of what that means.
Very clear.
Yes, sir.
What do you think the main reasons are for all the opposition to fracking here in New York? And how do you see the gas companies overcoming this perception
I think a lot of it is people that are just opposed to fossil fuels in general. I think that's the root of most of it. Second of all, I think it's an area that has not really encountered large-scale drilling in the past. They don't have a lot of experience with this. I've worked in the oil and gas industry for over 30 years in mostly Houston, Oklahoma City, Louisiana, all areas that have had oil and gas drilling for generations. And it is universally accepted, welcomed, and that comes from having it in your neighborhood, seeing how it works, working with the companies. The companies really do want to be good neighbors. But, you know, in New York, we haven't really had that, so it's a fear of the unknown, I think. And the way to overcome that is really to have drilling occur and see that companies can do it responsibly. Then I think it will catch on. But until that point, people are still going to have a fear of the unknown.
Anybody have a question for Shelley?
That's okay, I don't mind.
Well, I have a question for you.
I would like to make a comment about that though, because, okay, we have wells on our property and every day we would go up and we would watch the process. We wanted to be educated in it, not just stand back and say, okay, whatever, you know? And we built relationships with these people and they would explain things to us as they would go along. But that is one of the things that they said. Because they were coming from these other states. And all of a sudden they get to Pennsylvania and, you know, where normally they were welcome to the area, all of a sudden it's like, oh, well, wait a minute. And, you know, in a couple instances, it's like, keep your head low. Because the reception wasn't a positive one. Because it was new, it was different. People were, like you said, afraid of the unknown. But as they've gone through it, it's been incredible in our area. Now, I don't know about your job situations in New York State, but I know that Susquehanna County was pitiful as far as our young people graduating from high school. They weren't finding jobs in our area that were going to sustain a family, help them to buy a place. But through the development of the natural gas and the jobs that it has created, not only just on the rigs, building the pads, you know, and things like that, but all the trickle down, all the support system that comes along with it, whether it's somebody with a lunch wagon that goes to the rigs, and she had to buy another one and hire another person, or the guy that has to deliver all the porta potties. The jobs that have been generated in our area are incredible. Our restaurants are full, our hotels are full, our gas stations are always busy. You know, that waitress at the end of the night that gets a decent tip from these people that are in there eating all the time. You think she's not thankful for the gas company being there? So that fear was there at the beginning, but now we're seeing how it has helped our area in so many ways. It's incredible. It's clean, it's cheap, it's here, and it's making jobs for our people. Our schools are changing curriculums. Our VOTEC has reevaluated things and say, oh wow, they're gonna need a lot of welders. Okay, so they start up their welding programs. They look in different areas and see what jobs are gonna be needed. And they incorporate that in their curriculum so that our young folks can stay close by and have decent paying jobs and be proud of what they do. Not only being able to pay their bills and everything, but something that helps our country get off foreign oil and become energy independent. And I think that's very important. And it's important to our young people that have seen this come in and they've become a part of it.
Shelley, can you describe for folks, and you have, in the movie you said that you have at least one well on the property now.
We have 4.
You have 4 now. Could you describe for folks the kind of the impact of the well development, how long it took, and what you saw during that process, and what you have there now?
It was incredible. I guess the first thing that really impressed us is the fact that from one well pad, they can drill so many wells. It's permitted for 10. We have 4 that are drilled, fracked, and are now producing. They've started producing this spring. And it's incredible how our outreaching and the fact that our neighbors don't have to incur having these pads on their property, because from our pad, they can go down and out and go a mile or more. And it's drawing all that gas, so the land disturbance is minimal. And people say, oh yeah, but we've got that big ugly pad. No, there are stages that it goes through, yeah. They did pick the only flat field we owned, the only one where you could pull the pin and not lose the hay wagon off the hill. But, and it's right next to our pond, which has always been our vacation spot, and people say, oh, they ruined it for you. Well, we were up there today, we were up there yesterday, we'll be up there tomorrow at our pond, swimming, having lunch and enjoying it. And they say the noise is incredible. No, the noise is not incredible. You go through certain stages where there is noise. But it's a stage. It doesn't last forever. People say, oh, the truck traffic is phenomenal. For a while, but this too shall pass. Yeah, when they were building the road, when they were building the pad, when they were bringing the water and stuff like that. But now they're pumping more water instead of having all the truck traffic. They're finding better ways, more efficient ways to do it. So at each stage, you know, when they were drilling, we were welcome in there anytime to watch the monitors, watch the bit go down through. Same with fracking. We were actually in the command station watching it, watching the monitors and everything, and watching it go through the stages. We have the pipeline that goes right through our property also. And people say, oh, there goes your cropland. No, it goes right through our cornfield, and we planted corn just fine this year, and it is beautiful corn right on top of that pipeline. It is not a problem. Our heifers are right there. We've got pictures of them because we took pictures of the whole process. It's something that you want to know, and you want your people around you to know. So we took pictures through all the stages. And our heifers, they're up there from the beginning of May, almost to the end of November, right there within sight of them and around. Does not bother them one bit. Never has. You don't see hair falling out. There is not a problem at all. So as we go through all these stages, like I said, people get uptight about things. But technology advances. We advance, and we need the energy that it's producing. Now, I can bet that none of you, when you go on vacation or go someplace, want to get in the airplane that was built by Wilbur and Orville. Because you say, oh, that's not safe. Technology has advanced. We enjoy updates. We enjoy the blessings that we have and the ingenuity that people have. And as it goes along, the oil and gas companies will come up with more ways, better ways, more efficient ways. And you know darn well if they're more efficient, they're going to be using them, because isn't that what it's all about in the end? Being able to produce and have a good bottom line there and create jobs. They become more efficient at what they do. These gentlemen have incredible skills. They went to school and they studied hard and long, and now they've put their skills to work. And I'm very proud of what they do to help our American public. We are spoiled. We waste an awful lot, which we should not do. But here we are blessed with a wonderful resource that we need to capitalize on.
In the back.
I just wanted to make a comment that one of the most interesting things when you talk about the energy use and the people in our country that use energy the most, when you look, a lot of people have their cooking, your grills, your gas grills, your stoves in your home, all the nice, the Vulcan stove that you have, most likely it's running on gas. And the bottom line is, it's not just natural gas that's fracked. Oil products are fracked. All your petroleum products are fracked. So when you go and you step out of this building and you go and you get in your car, you're getting in a vehicle that's going on something that's fracked. Everybody uses fossil fuels. I think they've said that we are, in fact, one of the most spoiled countries as far as our energy and what we have the ability and the wherewithal to gain in this country. And everyone wants to turn their lights on when they go home. These lights aren't, you don't plug your hybrid car into the air. That electricity has to come from somewhere, and that comes from a fossil fuel, that comes from coal. You're burning coal. We know for a fact that people are dying from black lung from coal. I don't see the environmentalists jumping up and down about the poor people that are dying from black lung or that have astronomical health issues because of that. However, when you look at the fact that we're all using these natural resources, and we have people that say, we just don't want it to come from our backyard, that's very, very upsetting. And I think one of the best photos that a friend of mine just recently this last week took down in Dimmock at one of the Chesapeake wells were the frogs that were jumping in the puddles all around the gas wells. And if there were a problem with any type of chemicals and spillage and different things, there would not be frog life, because frog life's the first to go. I didn't really have a question, just a statement.
Yeah, I think for you to say that the surface impacts are minimal is misleading and disingenuous. When you talk about the surface impacts, it goes on and on and on. When I was in Pennsylvania in 2010, there were 2 wells per pad. Now there's about 6. There's going to be 18 to 20 is what I've heard. So this is going to be a 30-year buildup. It's going to go on and on and on. And there is a whole spider's web of pipelines, access roads that can't run over the pipelines, well pads, compressor stations, and truck trips that run across the land. And it doesn't just come and go. It comes and goes and comes back, and comes and goes and comes back. And the surface impacts are not just the geology and the land and the subterranean and the fields. The surface impacts are the people too. And in Pennsylvania, what about the people in your town, Shelley, that can't afford rent anymore? Because in Pennsylvania, in the towns that are drilled, because there is no housing, because a lot of the jobs come from outside, witness Chesapeake building a 238-person dorm for their workers, and unless they're hiring the homeless off the streets, they're coming in from somewhere else. And people that are now being displaced all around Pennsylvania because they can't afford the rents are doubling and tripling. Well, that's great for the property owners, but most people don't own property. And the elderly, and there's more people in foster care, and homelessness is increasing. So that's a surface.
Is there a question?
Well, that's a surface impact as well. So I would, you can't ignore the social impacts.
Oh, there are social impacts.
Yes, and property impacts.
And I think you have the opportunity to hear from Shelley tonight, who is somebody who is experiencing this firsthand. This is not anecdote. It's not innuendo from Shelley. She's the person who is I understand that people have strong opinions about this subject, and it's good to have a discussion and to educate ourselves about it. But we're not going to engage in a debate this evening. If there's a specific question about the service impact that you have, please ask that question. But let's try to limit it to the experiences and knowledge that we have. And I should have mentioned this earlier. Everybody here tonight is here of their own time. They've come from out of town, and there's nobody being paid. And I would ask you to give our panel the respect and sorry. I wasn't doing it.
But I mean, we asked the question, what is the resistance? And there's a lot of issues when.
Can I comment? Let me just, I think we all understand that there's positives and negatives to everything. And you're talking about the homeless and that, people that can't afford rental property or places to live. There's also the concept, there's areas now that had very, very poor medical health, had poor hospitals. Montrose, Pennsylvania just received huge amounts of money to help build their home. I mean, their hospital will now be able to take care of people that otherwise they never were able to take care of. I mean, these are things that economic opportunity bring. And you're right, there are pluses and minuses, but we can all probably agree that without the advancements in the development of economic wealth in this country, we all wouldn't have what we have, okay? The people that are without shelter, trust me, there are more people in Montrose or any other town in Pennsylvania now who are donating to the churches and donating to the shelters so that these people have things that they never had before, because that extra wealth brings it there. If you don't have that, you will have without. I know from the look on your faces, you want to disagree, but
These people had homes and now they don't. They were long-standing renters. Gas bill came in and they don't have homes.
They didn't have homes, they were renters.
Yeah.
Okay, they were living at the will of someone else providing them shelter. When someone else finds a better deal, what if that person said, I don't want to rent anymore, I'm just going to bulldoze my home? They would not have a home either. So you have to understand economics. Okay? And the truth, really the truth of the matter is, and I got into this argument with a young lady that wanted to argue about the World Health Association should be involved in this. And I did a project with a company, we were going into Russia. Okay? And we were looking for money from the World Association. And you have to deal with the World Health Association. And you know what the first thing they asked you for? How much money are you going to donate to the hospital? How much money are you going to donate to help take care of things? So without that money to donate, without that wealth coming in, you don't develop the things that people need. And that is the truth.
Go ahead, Jen. We have about 5 minutes. I want to make sure that folks get a chance to ask any questions they might have. Yes, ma'am.
I will say that you said that if there had been strict regulations, what happened in Dimmitt wouldn't have happened, which means that what happened in Dimmitt was fracking. So
Not a fraction, it's a cementing job that was not properly completed because of the regulations that
disruption from fracking that neutralizes the naturally occurring methane gas. My question is, the Marcellus is known to have some nasty heavy metals, some very strong brine, and most importantly, a low, but their level of radiation. So how do you deal with, beyond the recycling? I know that there's still excess produced water with these contaminants. What do you do with that?
Okay, what we're talking about is water treatment. First of all, it's contained within the casing until it comes to the surface. Once it's at the surface, it's, in New York State, it's going to be required to be fully containerized in enclosed vessels. And once it's in those vessels, there's a few ways it can be treated. I should start off by saying up to about 98% is the current number of around 98% of that water is reused in the next frac job, and it's continued to be recycled or reused. Because remember, water is a commodity to the operators; they have to buy it at some point. So the more that they can reuse it, obviously, it's to the benefit. But at some point, it becomes, like you said, it will pick up the minerals in the subsurface from the Marcellus and the brine. And at that point, a couple things either happen. It either gets trucked for disposal in the deep injection well, of which there are thousands and thousands around the country, and those are regulated by the EPA. Or it is treated. There are a number of companies in Pennsylvania that specialize in treating this type of water. And that industry has really taken off in Pennsylvania. You don't see it in New York because there's nothing to treat in New York yet. So that industry has proliferated in Pennsylvania. And once this process begins in New York, you'll see those companies come to New York also to treat that water. It's basically a chemical type of treatment. Different additives are put into the water that remove the minerals that are in the water, and that leaves you with a brine. Then that brine can either be treated or again taken for a deep well injection. So that's generally what happens with the water.
A, the radiation, and B, sealing them in containers and presumably transporting it. Now you're talking about even more use of diesel to do all that. So it's, there's a real problem with diesel. There's also a problem with methane, seeping, methane, escaping from joints, et cetera, methane being a much more potent greenhouse gas. But I guess I still want to know about the radiation because I've never heard of anything except like really extreme, like places that specialize in dealing with water with radiation levels. How do you deal with that part?
We're really over time already, so my suggestion is to go read Appendix 10 of the SGDIS, so that the DEC has looked at this issue and examined the issue of radioactivity as related to oil and gas development. It's addressed in the study, and I'd suggest that's an excellent place to start. And if anybody on the panel wants to engage in that conversation after we're done, that's fine. But I want to give folks a final opportunity for those who haven't asked a question, ask a question, or I know that. Go ahead. This will be the last question.
Thank you. My question pertains to the proposed regulatory system. So I think a month ago, Governor Cuomo said that he'd open up drilling in 4 counties in the southern tier, and then give each town within those counties, the choice to ban it or allow it. I guess my question is, like, from a business perspective of a gas company, what incentive is there to come into New York? Because I know a couple of years ago, we expected this explosion in New York. I heard people say that, natural gas can do for Western New York a whole different future. And it just seems like with this regulatory scheme, the really low price of natural gas, is New York really going to see that kind of explosion if the moratorium is lifted?
I'll speak speak from an operator's perspective, simple answer is no. And the patchwork concept of local regulations is truly the wrong approach. I mean, the industry, I've been doing this in Europe for 30 years, the industry has been well regulated at the state level. There is a supersedure in state law that doesn't allow local regulation. I mean, there's some court battles over that and whatever, but if there's a continuation of the concept of, you know, 5 guys on a panel being able to control what you do, then there will be no investment in New York. That's my personal opinion. So, anybody else want to comment?
Well, I certainly agree with that. I think allowing the towns to put moratoriums in is going to make it very difficult for companies to want to come in here and develop. We have compulsory immigration in New York for a very good reason, and I think most people that are familiar with that think that is the best system. I know there's a lot of people that are new to the industry that disagree with that, but we really have to have a systematic way to develop our natural resources from not only a landowner's perspective for the most efficient